or rather you cooperated. And you are still cooperating. And you are still cooperating as Lord Chaitanya Sampradaya. That is my life. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrutyam Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraye Nashtaprayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10 and Text 9. Ekam Ekatara Abhave Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yatha Na Upalabhamahe Yatha Nopalabhamahe Tritayam Tatra Yaha Veda Tritayam Tatrayo Veda Saha Atma Swashrayashrayah Sa Atma Swashrayashrayah Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yatha Nopalabhamahe Tritayam Tatrayo Veda Sa Atma Swashrayashrayah Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yatha Nopalabhamahe Tritayam Tatrayo Veda Sa Atma Swashrayashrayah Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yatha Nopalabhamahe Tritayam Tatrayo Veda Sa Atma Swashrayashrayah Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yatha Nopalabhamahe Tritayam Tatrayo Veda Sa Atma Swashrayashrayah Ekam one Ekatara another Abhave in the absence of Yadha because Na does not Upalabhamahe perceptible Tritayam in 3 stages Tatra there Yaha the one Veda who knows Saha Atma the super soul Swa own Ashraya shelter Ashrayaha of the shelter. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swamy Prabhupada. Translation. All the above mentioned 3 stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, the other is not understood. And the Supreme Being who is seeing every one of them as the shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore He is the Supreme Shelter. Please repeat. All the above mentioned 3 stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, the other is not understood. And the Supreme Being, who is seeing every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. Purport by Shraddha. So there are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision, and we can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus they are interdependent, and neither of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent, and one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As it is stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all interdependent objectives is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth, the Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is Swashrayashayaha, is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma, Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama or the super person, he is the source of the super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama or the source of everything, and thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the super soul or Supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the super soul and the individual soul is dependent on the super soul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the super soul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense also the super soul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity or the Jiva is always dependent on the super soul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the super soul Paramatma doesn't forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many previous births, but the Lord, the Super Soul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the Sun God some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as is stated in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschana. The Lord in his eternal blissful body of knowledge is fully aware of all that had happened in the past and that which is going on at the present, as well as what will happen in the future. And in spite of his becoming the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. This, the propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities, is completely misleading, because even a person or individual like Arjuna would not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man know about his past, present and future, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness? Presents the Bhaktivedanta Purport. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Dhananjana Shalakaya चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So in this world there is a concept of controller, uncontrolled. There is a concept of dependence, more specifically a concept of interdependence. Every one of us, we are interdependent. We have to depend on somebody else. And even powerful demigods like sun, who supplies the heat and light every day, even he is dependent on us. Prabhupada says, if you don't have the eyes, what is the use of the sunlight? So in that sense, he is also dependent on us. So here in the previous verse, 3 types of Purushas are explained: Adhyatmic, Adibhautik and Adidhaivik. Adibhautik means actually this body. Although it is a body, still it is considered Purusha. So all these 3 stages are interdependent. How they are interdependent? Somebody is a controller and somebody is controlled. This is the scenario. Nobody can say, I am free from control. Nobody can say, I am free from a controller. Everybody has to be under the control of a controller. This is the scenario. Right? This is the word. So in the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna explains in the 3rd chapter that at the beginning of creation, Sahayajna Praja Shrushtva Purovacha Prajapati, it is explained that there are demigods in this world, and then one has to do sacrifices and satisfy them. In the next verse he says, Devan bhavayate anena te deva bhavayantu vaha parasparam bhavayanta. Now here is interesting principle. Parasparam bhavayantaha. We have to please them, the demigods, Adidhaivik, Purushas, and they will please us back. They will also supply all the pleasant things. So very simple principle that yes, there is a chain of controllers and control. There's a huge chain is there. There are clear definitions of who is dependent on whom, who is dependent on what. All these things are clearly delineated in this world. But the point is, nobody is completely independent. Nobody can say, I am actually independent, I don't depend on anything of this world. Such statements nobody can say. But unfortunately, people think that they are independent. They celebrate independence. They celebrate their independence. They think they are independent. This is the scenario. But actually, nobody is independent. We all have to depend on somebody else. So here it is mentioned, ekam ekatara bhave yadha nopa tritayam tatrayo vedha sa atma swashrayashaya. So now in this world we are seeing this chain of dependency. Everybody is interdependent. The question that comes is, if everybody is dependent on one another, Here in the translation it is mentioned, in the absence of one, the other is not understood. So if, like Prabhupada says, without the Father, our Father, we will not be able to understand the Son. And similarly, you cannot understand the Father without looking at His sons. There is a dependence on our understanding, our perception. So for example, here Prabhupada is saying, without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, let us say you look at two people. Now, in that, who is controlled and who is the controller? How will you recognize? You look at some two people or three people, some group of people are there. How do you recognize that who is the controller and who is controlled? Actually, that system will be there. Anywhere you see some people in a group or a company or whatever, in a family, these things are clearly delineated, mentioned. So, what is the medium of perception to understand? Let us say you go to a very, some interior, some place, and you will see a group of tribals. Immediately you may not know who is the controller and who are the controlled. But slowly, if you observe for some time, you will understand that yes, there is some kind of a system is there. So Prabhupada is saying, if you look at these controllers and controlled, the question that comes is, who decided this kind of a structure in this world? There must be somebody who has put in place this structure, and everybody knows. Once I was coming from Vijayawada to Hyderabad. So for some purpose we stopped the car on the side, and there is one tree nearby. We saw there is some life on the tree. Some squirrels are there, some small birds are there, and the squirrels are eating something, birds are catching some, some worms and all that. It's going on. And suddenly we saw one big bird coming there. As soon as one big bird is trying to come there, immediately the squirrels escape, and all the little birds are just flown off. And that bird I have not seen actually in my experience. It's a very differently, it has different features. Although I have not recognized what it is, they recognized. There is a medium of perception is there. Who is giving this understanding to the squirrel that this bird is the controller, better take care? So who gives this medium of perception? So that's why here it is mentioned, Sa Atma Swashrayashraya, the one who is not dependent on anybody. That kind of an Atma, that is super soul, is called Swashrayashraya. So Prabhupada is explaining here, who has made such a relationship of interdependence? Who has made these relationships of interdependence? So that is Sa Atma, is the super soul. And then what kind of a personality is he dependent on anybody? It is saying here, Swashrayashraya, he is not dependent on anybody. There is one personality who can say, I am completely independent. Swarat. Abhijna Swarat. There is one personality who can say, I am completely independent, and he is not dependent on anybody. But whereas we are all dependent on various things. So Prabhupada is saying in one of the purports that in Kali Yuga people live short lives because they are excessively dependent on others. So this is They depend. He will give me business. He will save me. He will protect me. Like that, we dependent on many people like that. Or we think he is my friend. He is going to come to my rescue. These are the kind of dependencies that we create. And when we see that those people are not responding according to our wish, they are not responding to our requirements, we come under a lot of anxiety. And because of the anxiety and the tension and this false dependence, one's life comes down. This is how it is. Whereas devotees, they don't want to depend on people who themselves are dependent. We don't want to depend on the people who are dependent on other kinds of people. So that's why some people, they see this. Oh, in the human society, I cannot depend on anybody, so let me depend on Adi Daivik personalities. Let me depend on some demigods because they appear to be possessing much superior power than the humans that we see every day. So that's why they start worshipping, approaching demigods. Right? But devotees, they understand that even demigods are also not dependable. In Ramayana we see Ravana, he depended on a demigod, but finally the demigod could not save him. Like that we see innumerable examples where even demigods are also not dependable. Even if you depend also, they are there only for 100 years. After that, what happens, they themselves don't know. They have to depend on something else. Right? So that's why, whom should we depend on? That is the question here. Swashraya. We should depend on someone who is not at all dependent on anybody else. And that is the Supreme Lord. So here it is mentioned, but then that Super Soul is also, the source of the Super Soul is also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Ekamshena sthito jagat. Krishna says, I am situated in this entire universe, ekamshena, by my plenary portion, by my amsha. So that is, that expansion is called the Super Soul. So Bhagavad Gita talks about Lord's expansions. In this verse it is mentioned that by his one of his expansions, he maintains an entire universe. So that means the Super Soul is also coming from one more ultimate source, and that is Krishna. So in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, Krishna says that he is the Purushottama, Uttama Purusha. Super Soul is known as Madhyama Purusha. And the Jivas are known as Adhama Purushas. We are the lowest. Here the Purushatva is also temporary. He may be Purusha in this life, next life he may be Stri. Now by technology, even in this very life also people can change all this. Women are becoming men, men are becoming women. So this is Adhama Purusha. Super Soul is Madhyama and Krishna is the Purushottama, Uttama Purusha. So we have to depend on such Swashrayashra. Once one devotee, he approached Prabhupada. Basically he wrote a letter. Those days Prabhupada instituted one system that every month the temple president has to send a monthly report to Srila Prabhupada and explain what is happening in the temple. Even now the system is continuing. Even now we send reports, monthly reports. So So the one of the leaders, they have written to Srila Prabhupada, this is what has happened to our temple. And then he says, when I am going outside, when I am doing Sankirtan or distributing books, whatever, I am able to think of Krishna nicely. But when I come back to the temple, there are so many other things that I have to think. And I am thinking of Krishna less. So which one is better? Should I do more service and think of Krishna less? Or should I do less service and think of Krishna more? This is what he asks. So, because he is concerned that when I am doing less of services, I am able to think of Krishna more. And if I am doing heavy services, then I am unable to think of the Lord. And Prabhupada writes, in any circumstance, one should be absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna. He summarizes his 2 questions in one line. And then he adds one more interesting point. He says, now how you can do that? How you can be absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord? He says, when you are doing service, you should think that I am not qualified. I am not at all qualified to do this service. And by my spiritual master's mercy, I got this service. And that's how, when you think like that, that's how you depend on Krishna always. In our mind, in our consciousness, we should develop that thinking. I am not actually qualified to do this. I am helpless. And that's how you depend on Krishna automatically. So this is the dependence, means that. Like a small child, he is dependent on the parents, that's all. He doesn't know what to ask. The child himself doesn't know what actually he requires. One side he doesn't know what he requires. On the other side he doesn't know what to ask. But nonetheless, the child is completely dependent on parents. And although he may not know what to ask or what to demand, he is taken care of automatically by the parents. See, this is called dependence. Dependence is different from asking something, give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. No. It is completely different. It's a different existential situation. So similarly, a devotee is like that. He is simply dependent on Krishna. That's all. He will not ask anything for his selfish benefit. He will not ask anything. He simply depends on Krishna. That's why devotees are nishkama, desireless. They don't have any desires. They simply do their services. That's all. For the pleasure of the Lord, they will do. And if there is something they need, they may not ask, but Krishna supplies. So that's the meaning of dependence. One has to depend on Krishna. And Prabhupada is saying how that will come. Very nicely he is saying, you should think that actually I am not qualified. Nicha jati, nicha janma. What can I do? What qualifications I have got? Somehow my Guru has blessed me with this service, I am trying to do. And then he depends on the Lord. How that service can become perfect, how that service can become qualified, he leaves it to God. So devotee, he prays to Krishna that, okay, give me qualification, bless me with your qualification, so that I can do services that are assigned to me by my spiritual master. This is dependence. That's all. Other than that, he will not ask anything from the Lord. It's kind of a competition. It's like sometimes Lord himself may offer, take this. Still he will say, no, I don't want to take. Like Prahlad, He had Darshan of Narasimha directly. He's seeing Narasimha face to face. And Narasimha said, okay, you ask whatever you want. And Prahlad said, I'm not a manik. I'm not a businessman. That I did some service to you and then so you are happy, so now I can ask something from you. No. Devotee is not interested in doing business with Krishna like that. I did some service, now I want something from you for myself, for my own satisfaction. No. So this is the dependency. So Prabhupada is explaining that there is a difference between these three kinds of purushas that we discussed in the last verse and the super soul. Those three purushas are basically interdependent, they're dependent on each other. Right? And but whereas Swashtraya Ashtraya is a different category of purusha, is Purushottama, and he and the ordinary Jiva can never be equated. Can never be equated. So Prabhupada is spending almost some 2 paragraphs here to explain the difference between the Jiva and the Paramatma, and then he says the Jiva can never remember the past, nor is he able to see what's going on in the present, nor he can see what is coming up in the future. Jiva has no such capacity. A conditioned Jiva, living entity, doesn't understand any of these things, past, present, or future. A liberated person can see what is coming up in the future, what happened in the past. Somebody who is free from the laws of material world, he is called liberated. Then he is not dependent on this energy, on this material energy, but he is dependent on the spiritual energy. Ultimately, we all need a shelter. We need a shelter. Let us say there is a scorching heat. We all try to go under a big banyan tree. Right? Because particularly in Vrindavan, when you are doing parikrama, in some patches it's very hot. By noon it will become very hot, and then the wonderful dust of Vrindavan will also be a little hot, and then we will not be able to walk nicely. So whenever there is a little tree, immediately we rush and try to be under them. It's called shelter. If you have shelter of these ordinary, these three categories of this world, you will be in anxiety. You will not be sheltered properly. No guarantee. But if you come under a big banyan tree, that is in that scorching heat, you are satisfied. You are sheltered from all sides. Right? So similarly, if you seek the shelter of Krishna, he shelters you from all sides. No need to ask anything. The devotee remains desireless, happy, satisfied. And Krishna knows how to take care of his devotees. So that is the beauty. Prabhupada is quoting Bhagavad Gita, Vedaham samatitani. Krishna knows past, present and future, whereas Jivas doesn't know. Now in this age particularly, the recommended shelter is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then 3 times it is denied that anything else can be a shelter. Hare Namaiva Kevalam, Kalau Nastiva Gatirendaka. 3 times it is denied that something else can be shelter in this life, in this world. So one has to increase their dependence on holy name. While working, let us say you're cleaning this temple hall, add holy name. You're cutting vegetables, add holy name. Depend on the holy name more and more. You're doing any service, Are you walking from here to there to here? Simply sing a chant. Don't depend on your mind what it says. Sometimes mind will show nice movies, but sometimes horrible movies also. Right? So we cannot depend on the mind, we cannot depend on our intellectual abilities. We can only depend on the Harinam. So increase Harinam content in the life. More and more, more and more. And then you may say, no, I depend on my work. Shastra says, Nameva kevalam. Nastiva, nastiva, nastiva. Can I depend on jnana? No. My yogic abilities, ability to shift the mind from here to there and all those things? No. The only way is we need to depend on the holy name. Increase the holy name in your life, and then you will see that Swashraya, you feel that I am under the supreme shelter. Any questions?
Can you throw some light on that?
Super soul, we all know, is situated in the heart of all the living entities, and he plays the role of order supplier. The Jiva desires something and he fulfills. So since he is playing a role of an order supplier, he is known as Madhyama. Whereas Krishna, you will never be able to order him. On the other hand, you have to follow his orders. We are meant to follow his orders. You cannot order Krishna. But of course, on a higher level, once you are liberated, you are situated in love of God, that time Krishna will follow your orders. Yashoda, you see any of these fastings, Krishna out of love, he becomes dependent on the devotees. And Yashoda also feels that my child is dependent on me. If I don't feed, what will happen to him? He will starve. Krishna is maintaining all the living entities, but so that's the relationship between a pure devotee and Krishna. So in the conditioned life, we have to learn to depend exclusively on Krishna, and once we become liberated, pure devotee, if somebody becomes a pure devotee, then the relationship is more of love. Sometimes Krishna depends on us, Krishna depends on the devotees, and devotees depend on Krishna. There is a sweet relationship. So Krishna's position is that he is Purushottama. He is not under the control or dictation of anybody. He is Swarad. That is the original position of the Lord. But because he accepts a position of order supplying, okay, you are asking, okay, I am giving. You will ask again, you will give. He has become like that. So that is out of his mercy. Out of his mercy on the Jivas, he accepts such a role. So that's why he is known as Madhyama. And Krishna is the Purushottama. And in the 16th chapter, Krishna also says that I am there in the heart. On 2 places he says, he and the super soul are same. 10th chapter he says, I am only my Amsha, Ekamshena. So we should know how Krishna, one personality, is actually created and maintaining and destroying everything that is there in all the universes. By what potencies, by what expansions, by what avatars, he does all these things. That is what Bhagavatam is. That one single source, how he is able to emanate so many things from his body, maintain them, create them and destroy them, and then again take back everything into his own body. It's all completely beyond our imagination. One single personality. The whole vibhuti, the whole thing is about one single personality, and that is Krishna.